Hi artists and art lovers, welcome to Season 3, Episode 5 of Princeton Makes podcast, where every month we meet an artist and dive into their creative life. I'm Lavi-Hasson and my guest today is Denise Porretto. Hi Denise.
Hi.
Let's start with you telling us what is Princeton Makes.
Princeton Makes is a co-op of approximately 40 artists who contribute their art and their time to a lovely space in Princeton. We're kind of like a family. Some artists have studios, they work on site. Other artists like myself, we work elsewhere at home and bring our art in to be sold.
Yeah. So Denise, tell us, what kind of art do you make? Because you don't make any regular oil, pastel, canvas kind of art.
That is correct. It may be a little bit hard for people to visualize, but I do make these boxes that look like cakes, cupcakes, torts, any kind of baked good. And they open up, as I said, they're boxes, and they can be used for centerpieces, storage, etc. I use, my preference is to use vintage chenille to make the frosting. And then I use a variety of other materials to decorate the cakes. Yeah. Vintage jewelry, beads, rickrack is a favorite of mine because it looks like the way frosting is on the edge of the cake. And I love glitter, so glitter is always on there too.
And they're very beautiful and a lot of colors and fancy. Very nice.
Thank you.
And we will have a link to your work in the show notes so everybody can see it while we talk. So Denise is actually the artist of the month of January. We're recording a little early because I'm going to be away. But Denise's work is going to be at the window from January 1st. She is not going to give an artist talk?
No.
Why not?
I am generally very shy.
Okay.
And it's difficult for me to talk in front of a group of people.
So you see, this is very cool that we're making this podcast. So if you want to hear Denise and her story, you're welcome to tune in. And also Denise sits at the store once a week at least. When is your usual shift?
Saturday afternoon, 2 to 6.
Yeah, so you can come and make her talk to you.
Yes.
One-on-one.
One-on-one is fine.
Yeah. So when we talked a little bit before about this episode, you said that you have a very artistic family.
Yes, I do.
So can you tell us about that?
It starts actually with my grandfather, my dad's father, who was a woodworker and made all kinds of furniture and wooden pieces. He was very talented. He was originally from Sicily. And that talent got passed down to my father. Now, my father was an artist in multiple mediums. He was a woodworker. He built built-in cabinets for my sister and I when we were children, and was also very good with making furniture. I still have a few of his pieces. He has passed away, but I still have many of his pieces.
And this was his job?
No,
occupation?
He was a silkscreen artist for many, many years.
So what kind of things he made with that?
T-shirts, signs. I remember those. From when I was a child.
Yeah. Did your grandfather, was that his occupation?
No, I believe he was a tailor.
Oh, so both of them, it was like a hobby.
Yes.
Right.
But what I really most remember about my father's art were his drawings. His drawings are, I guess you could describe them as pointillism. Everything was made with tiny, tiny dots. To reveal outlines and shadows and shades and tones. It was amazing to me when I look closely at something that looks black from a distance. It is actually a multitude of dots packed in together with white shining behind them from the paper. So everything was dotted. He mostly concentrated on animals, birds. There are some pieces that he drew architecture. There are a very few of faces, busts. One is, I believe, of Caesar. I think that there was an Abraham Lincoln. When he passed away, my sister and I went through his drawings, and we discovered drawings that we had never seen before. He was incredibly talented, and I believe had been drawing since at least high school, probably before then too.
And this is very unusual that in that generation you would see men having a hobby that is drawing, not right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that must have been very special for you.
It is. It really was. You know, I grew up with, on the wall, two of his earlier drawings of cars, old cars from like the early 60s. So for me, it was just normal. Oh, my dad draws.
Yes,
now I realize
now
how wonderful he was.
Yeah.
So that skill got passed down to the next generation, my sister and myself. My sister, though, is amazing. She draws profiles of, I know she has one of Joan Jett, she has one of Brad Pitt.
What medium does she use?
Mostly pencil, I would say. My dad was pen and ink. My sister is pencil. But those are the drawings, and she also paints acrylic medium. She also inherited my dad's woodworking ability, so she's very good around her house, building things, and she's excellent.
And this is also her hobby?
Yes, she's a graphic designer.
Okay. How was it as a child living in a house like that?
As a child, it was just normal to me to have a father who was talented. He never really shared his art beyond the immediate family. So it wasn't like he was having displays or exhibitions.
He didn't have a Princeton Makes?
No. So for me, it was just normal daddy draws. I just started, not necessarily because my dad drew, but because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I began by drawing, I love Barbie, so I would draw fashions for her, and I would actually draw multiple ones, like 10 or 12, and then staple them together and make them a catalog. And all the fashions would have names like, Summer Breeze or whatever.
For Barbie.
Right, yes.
What about Ken?
Oh, no, not Ken.
No, just Barbie.
Just Barbie.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that. That's how I started. And then eventually I just started just drawing. Well, it wasn't only just drawing. I mean, I would draw things that I saw in books or in magazines. But I also worked with felt. I remember making flowers out of strips of felt on paper. So I was always kind of experimenting. I had this box that was about maybe 12 inches by 4 inches, and I called it my goodie box, and in it were colored pencils and a pencil sharpener and some paper, probably crayons. And
what age was this?
I want to say 10 and younger.
Yeah.
And that was the box that I had that I would take with me if we went to visit my grandparents, and use it to just, if I came upon anything I wanted to recreate or draw or do anything, I would have my goodie box. When I was in high school, I was still drawing on my own, and my dad had introduced me to this series of drawings of women's faces, and I copied one of those, and I still have that framed. So by the time I got to college, I was torn between art and English. I had been doing a lot of writing from childhood. I wrote poems when I was 11 years old. I wrote all through high school for the school newspaper. So I was torn between English and art. I eventually went with English. And so for a long time after that, my creativity was expressed with writing. And the art kind of fell a little bit by the wayside. There were years where I wasn't drawing at all. I was concentrating on grammar and just the the nuts and bolts of writing.
How did you get back to art, or you were writing more? Or
I was writing more. As when I graduated college, my first job was with Glamour magazine as an assistant editor. So I was editing for a while. I was very vocal about my desire to become a writer, either at Glamour or another of the magazines owned by the publisher. And so I eventually became a staff writer at Mademoiselle. And I was a copywriter there and wrote about fashion and beauty and nutrition. And right after that, in between all that, I had gotten married, and right during my first year at Mademoiselle, I became pregnant with my first son, and I decided not to go back to my job in the city.
Where did you live then?
I lived in Westchester, New York.
Okay.
When I was a young mother, I was a freelance writer, and I wrote mostly for parenting magazines, Parents and Parenting and American Baby, others, because that's what, of course, I was going through at that exact moment.
Right.
So I knew about it and I wrote about it. I did that all through the birth of my second son, which was 5 years later. When they were younger, I knew that I was interested in more crafty types of art. So I kind of got my fill by being a craft designer for the children in their classes as they were growing up.
Right.
But then, as they got older, I tried to get them into art myself. And actually, my younger son was drawing very intricate pieces that were abstract with colors, and I was very proud and very hopeful that he would continue. But alas, he did not.
He didn't.
They are grown up now. Neither one of them is an artist. We will see. Sometimes it just takes a while before you realize that you have that.
I mean, they have it in them. I don't see it. I have a choice. At some point, they will be like, "Ugh."
Yeah.
And you also did not go straight into art. You were a writer for a really long time.
Correct. Yes.
So that might happen to them too.
Exactly.
And then how did you come back to?
I started just making all kinds of different things using wood or felt, fabrics, acrylic paints that I would, paint on the wood. I started making different things, birdhouses, frames, a variety of items, all for myself, and occasionally as gifts. But my home got so overwhelmed with all these pieces that I thought,
problem.
It was. I think maybe there's a market for some of these things. So I started doing craft fairs.
Okay. Cool.
And I did so many craft fairs over the years. They are exhausting. I eventually kind of focused more on, after the variety of things I was making, kind of seasonal Christmas items. That's how I started selling them. I eventually moved on to felt flower brooches. I found that when I was at craft fairs, the jewelry sold like crazy. So I thought, let me try something like that. So I made felt flower brooches.
Did they sell?
Slightly better than the other things that I was making. Yes. And
it's a big leap of faith to start to. There's one thing to make for yourself and for your family. It's another thing to see, are people interested in actually buying this?
Yes, exactly. And they
were, slowly but surely.
Yes. And I also had a few items in various stores. By this time, I was living in Belmead. We had moved from Westchester to Belmead, and I had some of my items in a couple of stores. I don't really remember exactly how I started with the cake boxes. I think what I originally saw was a pillow that looked like a cake, and I just kind of started thinking about something that could be decorative but also functional. And so I thought, well, why don't I make them into boxes, because then people can use them as a gift, and then the recipient can use them in a functional way. Chenille reminded me so much of frosting, so that's what I started with. That's how I started making the boxes, and I called my company Sweet and Faux, after kind of like a play on words from sweet and low, and started doing craft fairs with those. Those were better than other things in the past.
Yeah.
You know, I made boxes just for general events and then for birthdays
Right.
and baby showers. And then members of my family were buying them. And I was also, you know, still giving as gifts.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into the boxes.
And how do you think, growing up in this house of artists, how do you think that influenced you to make art?
Definitely color was a big thing growing up. And I know I remember my dad when we were younger and we were watching the Mary Tyler Moore show. And I don't know if you recall, but there were colors that kind of opened, like lines of colors that opened up. And my dad pointed that out to me and said, those colors were specifically chosen
Wow.
to go with each other.
How old were you?
Probably young teens, maybe.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me.
Right.
So color
Yeah.
was something that I was very aware of. Making everything that I did, I was very aware of color. So that was then. Now I appreciate it so much more, knowing how talented my father was.
Yeah.
And how talented my sister is. I'm just continually amazed by her skill.
So other than your home influence and your dad and your sister, why do you wake up in the morning and feel that you need to make this cake today? Cake box.
I feel that is not only a way of expressing myself, as I do through my writing too,
Right.
but creating things expresses myself. And I feel that if I were not creating things, my mental state would be so much lower, and my energy level would be lower. I had a rough year in 2023 when I was diagnosed with cancer and underwent chemotherapy.
Yeah.
So, but art and creating things,
Yeah.
I did every day.
Wow, you kept going with
Yes, I did. And I felt like this really kept my head above water. I
Yeah.
had a really good attitude, which really surprised
Yeah.
me and members of my family, that I wasn't really depressed.
Wow.
And I think that art played a huge role in that,
Yeah.
as did my dog.
that? Your dog. And you were making the cake boxes?
I was making the cake boxes, and also I do make greeting cards.
Right.
And each card is a one-of-a-kind
Yeah.
piece. So I like that because I don't really like creating things in multiples.
Yeah.
I like making a one-of-a-kind piece that in a card that can be framed after the
Yeah,
recipient
yeah.
receives it. I use, of course, paper and cardstock, but I also use a lot of embellishments that you wouldn't necessarily think would go on cards.
Like?
Such as cabochons, which are like beads, but they're flat on the back.
Okay.
Sometimes I do little watercolor paintings and put those on the front of a card.
I didn't know you make cards. That's
Yes,
new
yes.
to me.
Yeah.
So you were painting or making something every day for
Yes.
that hard period, and
Yes,
it saved
yes.
you. Yeah.
And it got me through.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know it's such a healing.
It
thing
is.
to do.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These days you also make a lot of cake boxes and cards.
Yes, I've kind of concentrated more on cupcake boxes. So
Okay.
those are the
the
small
smaller
round
one.
top and cards. And I feel very fulfilled making both of those kinds because they're all one of a kind, and so everything is different and it keeps me energized and interested.
So here's a question. You make these cards, how long does it take you to make a card?
It could take a while, and I don't necessarily finish it in one sitting because there are always distractions.
So maybe 2 hours?
Yes,
Yes.
that's a good estimate.
Then how much do you sell them for? Each
My
one?
cards are $10 each.
That's not a lot of money.
Except for the wedding cards, which are bigger, they're $14.
And then people come and they're like, oh, this is $10 card. That's a lot of money. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes,
And then
yes.
they don't know how much work goes into
Right,
it.
right.
Not to mention creativity and everything.
Yes.
But yeah, I know. That's how it is.
Yeah.
All right. And how did you get to Princeton Makes?
I received an email one day from a woman who had attended or had seen my cake boxes at a craft fair. And she told me that Jim Levine, who's the owner of Princeton Makes, was starting an artist co-op, and would I be interested? And I just leapt upon that. I was so excited. I wrote back to her. I said, absolutely. So she put me in contact with Jim.
And that was in the beginning?
That was at the very beginning before Princeton Makes opened, yes.
And where do you live now?
I live in Princeton in a very small apartment, so my craft supplies are
So where do you make? Yes.
In the living room.
Okay.
In the living room. And
your studio is your house?
Yes.
And your house is your studio? That's not bad. The kids are not there, so...
No, exactly.
You have cats? Do you have cats?
No, just the dog.
So Denise, we are right at the Ask the Artist game, and I'm going to ask you some rapid questions and you're going to answer some rapid answers.
Okay.
So let's start. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. What is your favorite artist of all time?
I would have to say my father.
Oh.
And my sister.
Yeah.
Although when I first was aware of art, the Impressionists really captivated me.
What is your favorite material to create with?
Definitely fabrics. I love working with that vintage chenille and other cotton fabrics. I find that though I depend on mostly on glues. No matter what I'm making, I use glue.
What is the space that you feel the most creative at?
At Princeton Makes, I am very inspired by all the artists, no matter what they make. I go home from there and typically go right to my table in the living room and start making something.
Oh, wow. Amazing. What music or podcast, any sound that you like to listen to when you create?
I have on my phone a lot of different songs. I wouldn't nail it down.
What is your worst artistic nightmare?
Running out of inspiration and creativity.
I'll keep coming to Princeton Makes. You'll be fine.
Yes, yes.
In one word, describe how you feel when you make art.
Fulfilled.
Yeah. So where can people find you, Denise?
They can find me on Instagram at Denise Porretto. That's 2 R's and 2 T's. Porretto.
And we're going to put a link to that.
Okay.
Of course, at Princeton Makes.
Yes.
All of Denise's work is at, or most of your work is at Princeton Makes.
Yes.
For sale. And as we said, Denise's shift is on
Saturday 2 to 6.
So usually you can find her there.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Zohar.
We are Princeton Makes podcast. Our designer is RD. Our theme music is by Renata Pugh. I am Zohar Lavi-Hasson, producing and hosting. And if you have any questions or comments, please email us to princetonmakespodcast@gmail.com. Also, let us know if you would like to be added to our mailing list. We have a newsletter that Denise writes and sends to you.
Yes.
And that she doesn't send it much, so don't worry about it, but it's a very nice and informative. Please rate and share this podcast so it can reach others and maybe inspire them to create. Princeton Makes is located at the Princeton Shopping Center, and we're open Thursday to Sunday, 10 to 6. Till next time, be creative and kind.